Well, coming up on today's show, another Mercedes electric car has been spotted, this time the EQB. Record Model 3 drive unit production has been reported, and the Audi Q5 E-TRON is scheduled for launch. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Sunday the 30th of September 2018, last day of the month. It's Martyn Lee here, and I've been through every EV story today, so you don't have to. Well, thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. They've built the first marketplace all about used EVs. Buying, selling, learning, researching, all in one place. Check out myev.com. Got some brilliant responses to this week's question of the week and a brand new question of the week to set you at the end of this podcast. And I would love you to join in, please, and get interactive and get involved in the show. Right, let's get on to some quick news, really, because I've got a lot of comments and emails that I want to read you at the end of the show today. So won't spend too long on the news today, but there's four really big stories that I thought definitely deserved a little bit of attention. First of all, the Mercedes-Benz EQB. You thought I was going to say EQC, didn't I? No, we've seen the EQC. That's already been unveiled. We saw it recently, and some people were a little bit underwhelmed that it didn't come with a kind of eye-poppingly large battery, but Mercedes-Benz saying it's got all the battery it needs. Well, now the EQB has been spotted, this time in Spain. If you remember on the podcast I've told you about before, how the different letters that correspond to the classes of Mercedes, A-Class, B-Class, C-Class, you get the idea. The kind of sizes of Mercedes have all been registered and trademarked in various countries. And so this time, the Mercedes EQB was spotted in Spain. There's an EQA in concept version as well. This is according to Mark Kane at Inside EVs. The all-electric EQB is going to be a successor to the Mercedes-Benz B-Class electric drive, of which production came to an end a year ago. I know at least one listener of this podcast has been driving the electric B-Class sized Mercedes for a long time now, and we'll get to him in the comment section of this show. We'll hear from Mark at the end of it, and he utterly adores his car. Of course, originally built with Tesla bits inside, wasn't it, when that partnership was still going strong. Well, these spy shots make it look like the car is a nice, compact, small crossover CUV. It's not an SUV, but a little bit taller than your average sedan or saloon, but a lovely shape car for a lot of family people. It's not going to be too scary, too big compared to the EQC, which is a lot of car for many families who want a mid-sized family car. Well, according to Auto Media, the EQB comes with a variety of battery pack sizes starting at 60 kilowatt hours. That's more like it, starting at 60 and going all the way up to 110 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is huge for a car that size. It's kind of Mercedes GLB size, if you are familiar with that. And of course, that means it's not going to be too expensive. It's going to be coming in the, I would say, the difficult, isn't it? 40 to 50,000 euro bracket. I don't know. That's kind of picking numbers out of thin air, but yeah, perhaps that territory. So 60 kilowatt hour standard battery in the EQB, but you can increase that. 250 miles of range, probably real world range actually would be the minimum of that, and 150 kilowatt charge speeds. A lot of these German manufacturers now looking like they can't win on the performance side against Tesla, so they're going really big on trying to get some high numbers for charge speeds. Of course, Tesla themselves updating the superchargers later this year. Supercharger V3 coming out. Well, let's talk about Tesla then, but not about superchargers. This is about the Model 3 drive units, and Simon at Teslarati's picked up on a really interesting stat, actually, and that is that the Model 3 drive units could be produced now at more than 10,000 units per week in a 7-day period, according to data obtained by Bloomberg. Tesla Model 3 drive units had made 10,000 of them had been made in a 7-day period, and I'm kind of trying to work out what and unpick what a drive unit is. We know that it's made at the Gigafactory, so in Nevada. Is a drive unit everything in the car that is needed, or is a drive unit a battery pack and a motor? So that's the one thing that I kind of saw conflicting things online today, and I couldn't find a really definitive answer, actually. Is a drive unit a motor, for instance. That was something that was suggested today. And again, conflicting stories on this as well. So if they're making 10,000 motors per week, well, of course, some of those Tesla Model 3s are dual motor. If they're making 10,000 drive units, enough for 10,000 cars, well, that implies they would be stockpiling them because they can't make that many cars so quickly. Going to try and do some fact-checking on that and get back to you with a definitive answer. Well, let's talk about the Audi Q5 e-tron. It's another brilliant-looking Audi here, and, of course, it's a car that I think many people will be interested in because it's not one of these scary all-electric cars, as I'm sure some people think that they still are. It is a plug-in hybrid, and it's going to have hopefully a range of around 60 kilometres if we're lucky, maybe 65 kilometres. That's around 40 miles. And again, this is kind of where a lot of the next-gen plug-in hybrids are falling, between 30 and 40 miles. According to autocar.co.uk, they're putting the numbers on this. They say that the Audi Q5 e-tron is going to be coming in 2019. And it's going to be a car that, particularly in the United States of America, is expected to sell extraordinarily well. They say that for packaging and cost-cutting reasons, the electric motor is going to drive the rear wheels and the internal combustion engine is going to handle front axle propulsion, rather. And so with that, you can do some very funky four-wheel drive stuff, / all-wheel drive things when you make the battery and the motor power just the rear wheels, and some fantastic things for traction in terms of Audi's Quattro brand as well. Really smart way to do it, keeping costs as low as possible and not saying to people you've got to buy a full battery electric car. And you know, for a lot of people, I know that obviously a lot of people who listen to this podcast are super into pure battery electric vehicles. I am as well, and I get that, and I totally appreciate what everyone says. Let's just do it now. The technology's there now, so why aren't we doing it? And then I talk to friends who have no interest in it at all, and in their heads, remember that plug-in hybrids make a lot of sense because they say, but what about when I want to drive 600 miles to Scotland? And if you're listening to this in Scotland, what about when I need to drive 600 miles to the south coast? And you never do. You do those trips once a year, once every 3 years. But the thing with personal mobility, and one of the things that people have got their head around with having their own car, their own personal transport, I can go anywhere at any time on my own whim. And of course we never do, but then when people have to get their head around, actually you can't drive for 600 miles non-stop, you're going to have to stop and charge it. They don't like that for some reason, although actually the use cases don't match their imaginations of what they need a car for. It's only when you get people inside a pure electric car and they realise that they've spent the last month going to the shop and back again, and it does absolutely fine. Well, we'll get onto that actually in Question of the Week at the end of the show. There's a tease for you. One last story today then. It's a follow-up of yesterday's story. The BMW i3 and the i3S have been updated to the third iteration of the battery pack now. 42.2 kilowatt hours battery. Oh, I know I'm doing it in kilowatt hours. BMW won't be happy. They prefer me to do it in amp hours, but let's face it, they're the only ones that like it in amp hours. Well, the previous battery size, the one that you could still buy today, I imagine, has been starting at around £34,000 here in the UK on the road price. The new battery is about £1,000 more, about £1,110 more. About 35,180, that is in UK pounds. And obviously, you get a lot more for your money there. Another 9 kilowatt hours, another 27% more battery. Sales start in December here in the UK for the BMW i3. And I had a couple of interesting emails today. Firstly, yesterday I had an email from someone who is very familiar with this car, asking me what I knew about the range extender not being sold in the UK. My answer to that is I thought it was. So if you have any intel on that, you can always email me, hello@evnewsdaily.com. Let me know if you don't want me to say your name, if it's in confidence on the podcast. I would presume the range extender is being sold here in the UK as it's being sold in the US, because there's some EPA stats have come out for the range extender, so they seem to put it have put it forward for that, so there's still going to be the pure battery and the range extender. I don't know why somebody would think that the range extender isn't being, apart from they just heard something from another group of people who are really into i3s, and so you don't know whether this has been whipped up into something or whether it started in truth and it is the truth. So let me know either way. I haven't asked BMW, and I suppose when the press office is back to work on Monday morning, I can pop them an email and try and get some confirmation if the range extender is being sold, at least here in the UK, for both all-electric and range extenders. I would think so. This would be the third time they've updated, or the second time they've updated the battery, so it's the third iteration of the car, and each time there's been no suggestion that the range is getting any smaller. In fact, the range has got bigger because they added the i3S to it. But hopefully we can get some clarity on that, and I can update you on tomorrow's podcast, or at least Tuesdays, when I can do that on Monday. Should we get to your comments now? I love this section of the podcast because this is where you take over, and you really do fill in so many of the blanks in terms of my knowledge, the bits that I've not had experience of, different bits of equipment. And so that's what this week was all about. How do you charge at home? Do you charge at home? What EVSE do you use? What's your charger? What's your method? When do you charge? How much does it cost? All those kind of things. We're asking about your charging experiences. So here we go. Thank you very much. Oh, by the way, thank you so much. I mean, thank you really isn't, just saying it isn't enough, because I've just had a ton of emails this week, and it's been the busiest week ever, and I know that this is a fraction of them. So if you emailed in, I've read it, I've processed it, I've kind of assimilated it into what we talk about on the podcast. If I don't say your name, I'm dead sorry. But I've gone through all the emails this week. I'd be here for an hour just reading them out. Well, firstly, Victor. We'll start with Victor's because it was short and sweet and I liked it. I have no home charging. I rely on public infrastructure and have never had a problem. That's it. Whole email. Thank you, Victor. Brilliant. No charging at home. Wonderful. Good on you for making it work. Hi to Andrew Jacobs. I have a 2012 Leaf. I settled on the Clipper Creek 230 volt 16 amp charger, which was designed for European markets. Works beautifully in Australia, though, on 240 volts. My next door neighbour is a Sparky, and he installed it on a 32 amp dedicated circuit for the charger. The American-made charger arrived in 3 weeks and cost $600. I would definitely recommend Clipper Creek. Reasonably priced, reliable and compact. Hello to Glenn Mason, a good friend of this podcast, who's chipped in. His car is on a driveway plugged into a charger, which is the Zappy from My Energy. And if you don't know about that, highly recommend you go and have a look at that. Super clever technology. If you've got some PV, if you've got some solar, it can divert power to your EV rather than export it to the grid, because the feed-in tariff is a bit rubbish these days, and it's going. And if it would make more sense for you to charge your EV than export it to the grid, that's what that can do, and many other things as well. It's just proper EVSE, proper charger if you haven't got solar. We haven't got solar here, and it's one of those things that's been floating around in my head whether I need to make a call to have and be a happy Zappy here in my driveway. Well, it was installed by Aero, based in Newark in Nottinghamshire. The company was recommended by My Energy. I arranged it myself. I have solar panels, says Glenn, and the Zappy is able to charge the car with spare electricity. £299 was his cost for fitting, covered by the UK government's OLEV grant as well. I did say if you want to send me your numbers, you can, but no worries if not. And Mark, I mentioned earlier on the podcast, hello Mark Garnett, a friend of the podcast from one of the very first episodes, says, I do more EV miles than most, and yet I haven't got round to a dedicated EVSE installation yet. I've done around 38,000 miles via the granny cable. Wow, Mark, you win the award today. Almost 40,000 miles. And every night the 3-pin plug's been plugged in. He charges overnight every night. We live in a terraced house and park at the end of our rear garden. So he's all cabled up there, and he charges on the granny overnight. Good on you, my friend. Right, Malcolm Knight says, my charger is also a Zappy, and it cost £870 to have installed, which included, though, all the existing garage sockets had to be made RCD. It's linked to solar panels. I arranged it myself. The installer independently applied for the OLEV grant here in the UK, relieving me of that chore, so a lot less to pay, £370. Hello to John, who's a supporter of this podcast on Patreon as well. John H. Mayer III says, I have a solar set up for my home and paid $500 for a 40-amp charger for my home. I had it installed by a professional electrician because I was wary of messing with the electrical system since I have solar. The $1,500 cost also provides me with a warranty, 1-year warranty. My installation's outside my garage, and I share it on PlugShare and with my neighbour who has a Chevy Bolt. Hello to Jerry. Jerry Allison says, I charge at home with a Tesla wall connector that I installed myself. I managed to find some heavy cord on eBay last year. It's about 70 feet long, and I still have some left over. Hello to David Partington, says, at the time of buying my Leaf, I didn't expect to be in the house we're currently renting for more than a few short months, so decided not to bother installing a charger. Instead, I could charge my 24 kilowatt-hour Leaf overnight without any problems on the 3-pin granny charger into a socket in the garage. I run the cable out under the garage door and into my Leaf, and guess what? It works fine, rain or shine. The car's mainly used as a weekly runabout, and I usually just plug the car in overnight, 1 night a week. A good 12 hours is more than sufficient to charge to 100% from a low level. It takes no more than a minute to plug the charger in and a minute to unplug it. As it happens, we've remained in the same house for 10 months now, and this arrangement is just fine. David, really interesting actually, because we've moved recently and I've been saying on the podcast I need to get a charger installed into this house and I haven't got around to it yet. And yeah, what's wrong with charging on a granny cable if all you're doing is round the town miles and you can just charge overnight, even from empty? It's fine. The car is always in the driveway. And for most people, it's always plugged in. If you haven't got a driveway, on-street parking, please be sensible, please be careful, please don't drag cables across the street. You can get onto your local councils and authorities, I believe, in many parts of, certainly this country, many parts of the world as well, and arrange for chargers to be installed outside your house if you do have on-street parking and you haven't got a garage or a driveway. Well, Philippe Calvet says, I bought a used Nissan Leaf, the 24 kilowatt-hour one, last year, and I have the Flow X5, which I hadn't heard of before, the Flow X5 installation. It's outdoors, it's 7.2 kilowatts, it's connected to Flow and Circuit Electronique, and ultimately Hydro-Quebec. I'm looking forward to PV integration, load balancing, a bit of V2G and V2H, that's vehicle to grid and vehicle to home, being available with online firmware in the future. Philippe, wow, you are getting into this in a big way, talking about some V2G, V2H. Wow, we are, keep me updated. We're in awe of your forward thinking. Hello to Richard Boone. We have a Model S 100D. Hello! He didn't write that. I just added it. We have a Model S 100D and a Model X 75D. Oh, very nice. He didn't write very nice either. I'm still busking it. We use 2 wall chargers, the newest versions that allow load sharing and charge our cars from 11 p.m. to 7 o'clock in the morning. Right, a couple more. 3 more, I think. Mike Merwin says... Yeah, we've got 3 more. Mike Merwin says, I think the current question about EVSC, I'm not a pure battery electric vehicle owner yet, although I've ordered my Bolt. Deliveries in the next couple of months. In anticipation, I've purchased the Juicebox Pro Lite for my garage. I read lots of recommendations on it, and I ordered the light version because the software features of the full version are somewhat duplicated by the CARS system. Plus, I learned I can upgrade to the full version after the fact. I find that if I can benefit from the features. Hello to Kent. Now, Kent has done some conversions for me because he's done it in all sorts of prices. I've got 2 EVs now, says Kent. One is the Zoe, the 41 kilowatt, the 40 kilowatt hour, and the brand spanking new Kona 64 kilowatt hour. Wow, Kent, I love both of your cars. I had to install 2 charge points, and the price was not too bad. I chose the Viridian EcoLite charge point for its price and the range of power output it supports. Cost me, it says here, 6,500 nooks, which will be about £608. They were each, actually, and the electrician charged me 8,000 nooks. That's about £750 for the whole installation, the whole shebang. Actually, I'm not sure the word shebang translates to Norwegian. So a total of 21,000 nooks. That's about £1,966 for 2 charging stations. Not too bad. My 5.2 kilowatt solar panels. That's a nice system you've got. Helps on power consumption. I'm going full electric here in Norway, says Kent. Thank you very much. Right, last one today. We're going to go down under for this one. And Tim James says, Ripper, mate. He doesn't. He says, I'm in Sydney, Australia. And the energy provider AGL, puts me in the electric car plan. Now, hear about this. And I've saved the best to last, by the way, in terms of some value for money. Now, the electric car plan with his energy provider puts a separate meter in for his car. Now, they replaced his meters with smart meters free of charge, and for that, he pays $1 a day. So $365, $1 a day, unlimited charging on this one meter that you can plug your car into. Brilliant. Unlimited charging. So he goes on to say, a few months after it, I was contacted and offered a $400 incentive if he allowed AGL to install a smart charger, an EV Link smart charger from Schneider. And he's put a link to that, which I'll put in the show notes for you, which with it, the electricity provider is able to switch off his car charging if there's too much demand on the grid. I know it's a big issue for some parts of Australia. It doesn't happen here so much, but I know with kind of brownouts and blackouts, and we read that in the news and we feel for you, in some parts of Australia, very important to be able to turn off things like EV chargers. It's called a grid event, and he says that each grid event where they turn off the chargers lasts at the most an hour. He gets a text message via SMS before it happens, and he can decline to participate in turning off his car. If he knows he won't need the car to be fully charged, he can go with it, because each time he participates, he gets a 100 Aussie dollar credit. Wow. To sum it up then, 365 Aussie dollars for his vehicle charging, unlimited, a free charger, a free installation of smart meters, and every time there's a grid event, $100. Wow. Good on you. That sounds like a fantastic solution to charging up your EV in Sydney. Thank you so much for everybody who also emailed and on the YouTube comments that I simply didn't get time to read out because I'm over 21 minutes already, and I'm very sorry. I'm going to stop prattling on now. Shall we set up a brand new question of the week? Here we go then. Are you ready? I'd love to hear from you today with this answer, please. Thanks to myev.com for setting us this week's question of the week. It's a simple one this week, actually. In your opinion, plug-in hybrid or pure EV? Which one should you buy? Or which one did you buy? Plug-in hybrid or pure EV? Is range still a concern? Or maybe not enough selection in the EV segment that's going to sway you one way or the other? Is the plug-in like a gateway drug? Is the plug-in a necessity because you do a lot of miles, and where you live in the world, you can't quite yet rely on the infrastructure of chargers? Let me know. Plug-in hybrid or pure EV? And why? And we'll read out your answers next Sunday, as we always do when we put the answers on for question of the week. It's Sundays, by the way. I didn't say that at the start. I've just realised. Always the answers on a Sunday, on the Sunday podcast, always setting up a new question at the end of it. So you've got a whole week to send me your answers. Thank you very much to 88 patrons of this podcast. 2 more today. I was out for a walk and they both came through at the same time within 5 minutes. And it was sunset and the sun was setting over the beach and my phone beeps twice. I just looked down at two new patrons, and life didn't get any better. Like people saying, not only do we enjoy your podcast, but actually saying, we're going to support you in a very small way financially. And I know that I'd say small, but actually $5 and $10, what I call the posh coffee and the very posh coffee. You give up one of those a month and you get to support the podcast. It means a lot to me. And again, thank you really isn't enough. The words don't do enough. But thank you so much. And it was like, oh, this is amazing. There's 2 more people somewhere in the world have gone, you know what? I'm going to help support you. And I really appreciate it. 88 patrons of the show. Thank you very much for checking out patreon.com/EV News Daily. If you haven't checked it out yet, by the way, and it was new to me, it's just a website where you can go onto and find loads of creators, podcasts, artists, songwriters, poets, anyone who's making something. And sometimes you support just because you want to support them. And sometimes you want to get access to extra things. Like every Saturday, there's a bonus podcast just for the Patreon people who are executive producers and above of this show. They get extra one on a Saturday with more news. And so that's the way it works. And they sort of handle, it's all secure, like the credit card, your debit card, your bank card stuff. And I had to learn about it to make sure I wasn't getting into anything that I wasn't comfortable with, but thousands of of people, tens of thousands, I think, of creators use it, and it just takes all the hassle out of it. It's like you can just pop your card details in, and they look after everything. Well, there's 250 episodes of this podcast. They do remain online for free. They always will be online for free, thanks to the Patreon supporters that can pay for that storage and the funding of the streaming and things like that. So thank you very much. You are helping out literally thousands of people around the world who are learning about EVs every day by listening to this podcast. So we're all doing our bit to spread the word. And if you want to subscribe, you can on YouTube, on any of those podcast places, because the subscription is totally free. And if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.